we'll just proceed to our interview with Ken Klukowski, Breitbart legal analyst. How you doing tonight, Ken?
Cam, great to be with you tonight.
It is wonderful to have you, sir. Did you enjoy your time at the NRA annual meetings?
I'll tell you, that was fantastic. Like we talked about there, just so many people who are so engaged because they understand the stakes for freedom in their families in this election this year.
Amen. 73,740 attendees. It feels kind of cool to be part of a record, doesn't it?
It really does, especially when you understand that what brings those people together is just that they love this country, they love our Constitution, they love our freedoms and our heritage and their families. And so, I mean, it was a wonderful. The reasons that were driving them made it. That's what made it special to be a part of it.
Absolutely. All right. Now, one of the things that Chris Cox mentioned, Wayne LaPierre mentioned, and I have to say, I've even seen, honest to goodness, some legitimate media sources actually doing some real reporting on stand your ground laws. There's been, I think, a month of misrepresentation about what stand your ground really means. I saw Piers Morgan interviewing Cory Booker about stand your ground. Now, no offense to Cory Booker, but I'm not sure what the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, a city in a state that doesn't have stand your ground, really understands about the law, but apparently he's now an expert. I'm going with you, Ken. I think you're more of an expert on stand your ground, and you had a piece up at the Huffington Post, the truth about stand your ground laws. So what is what are some of the common mistakes, or not even mistakes, what are some of the common falsehoods that we are seeing reported about stand your ground legislation?
Well, in this case, of course, because there are some on the left who are exploiting the terrible tragedy involving the shooting of Trayvon Martin in Florida. It's always a sad situation when a young man dies, regardless of the facts. And there are a number on the left, such as anti-gun New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg, arguing that stand your ground laws are the reason that this incident happened. The reality, instead, is that stand your ground has nothing to do with the Florida situation. It was under either version of the facts, either what the Trayvon Martin family says happened, or what the shooter, George Zimmerman, what he said happened. Obviously, those two stories are very different. Mm-hmm. But stand your ground, Florida stand your ground law, would not be implicated under either of those versions of the facts.
Okay, so how so? I mean, can we walk through both scenarios?
Absolutely. Essentially, what's relevant here is that there are two elements that have to be present for stand your ground to be in play. One is that you must be the intended victim, not the attacker or the instigator. The second is that physical retreat, must be an option. Stand your ground is a narrow law. All it does is remove the duty to retreat. That is, in law, it's what we call the majority rule. A majority of states in the country, because this is a state issue, self-defense like this, that's a state law issue, not a federal issue, and that's a good thing. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution empowering the federal government to control this. At the state level, a majority of states had no duty to retreat. If you're attacked, you can retreat if you want, but if you think the safer course for you, if you think it is safer to resist your attacker, mm-hmm. instead of to turn your back on him literally while he is on top of you, without stand your ground in those few states where there was a duty to retreat, if you stood and fought back, you might be charged with a crime, as if you were the criminal in the case.
Right.
All the stand your ground law did in the states where it's been implemented is it says there is no such duty to retreat. You get to take whichever course you think is safer. Now, applying all that, Cam, to these facts, under the version told by Trayvon Martin's family, George Zimmerman instigated and provoked this incident with Trayvon Martin and was basically the assailant in the situation. If that's the case, stand your ground does not apply. Under Zimmerman's version, he was knocked down on his back. Trayvon Martin was on top of him, beating him. Well, if you're on your back on the ground, you can't run away. So retreat is impossible. And so stand your ground does not apply. Instead, that second scenario would just be governed by normal self-defense laws with nothing to do with stand your ground.
Uh-huh. All right. Now, and I've also seen, Ken, I forget who reported this, but I did see a story yesterday talking about the fact that the state of California, for instance, has had stand your ground, not through legislation, but through judicial decisions for about a century now.
That's exactly right.
That's
why it's called the majority rule, Cam. Most states in the country never had a duty to retreat.
Right.
Most states in the country had stand your ground, and as I mentioned in one of my columns with Ken Blackwell, the U.S. Supreme Court has unanimously embraced this more than once. For those who try and put it on racial overtones, in Beard versus United States, 1895, Justice Harlan wrote a unanimous opinion for the court embracing stand your ground law. When Plessy versus Ferguson was passed that same decade, creating separate but equal for African Americans, Harlan famously dissented with a long dissent about the dignity and worth of African Americans. So you have this champion of racial equality for Black Americans endorsing and embracing stand your law. Then 20-some years later, 1921, in Brown versus United States, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was another major progressive justice, not a conservative, also wrote a long opinion, unanimous again for the Supreme Court, explaining that stand your ground is an American concept. So, I mean, this is deeply rooted in American law. It's what most states had all along, and these statutes that we've been passing that are now being vilified were just passed to bring that small number of anti-self-defense states in line with the rest of America to make sure that all Americans can defend themselves no matter what state they live in.
Absolutely. Talking with Ken Klukowski, Breitbart legal contributor. And do I understand, Ken, was it Dave Hardy that I was looking at? Somebody was, one of the legal bloggers was talking about, Clayton Kramer. It was Clayton Kramer, who said as he was going through a lot of stand your ground decisions, he was struck by the number of cases that dealt with victims of domestic violence who were defending themselves. And I noted very early on in the coverage about stand your ground, there was a story that talked about how in Florida, this was one of the primary drivers of stand your ground legislation, the fact that prosecutors wanted to be able to do something to victims of domestic violence who acted in self-defense, but if there was a jury instruction that this woman, should have turned and run out of the house rather than, avoiding the beating from her husband, they wanted to be able to do something to protect these victims here.
Well, you raise an important point, Cam, because the reality is that stand your ground is to protect innocent life. It is to protect victims, not to protect attackers.
Right.
And statistically, the people who benefit more from that, women benefit more from it than men, and racial minorities benefit it more than from it more than white people. I mean, my co-author, Ken Blackwell, an African-American who was mayor of a big city and grew up in the federal projects, as we were writing this column and talking about it, there's the issue of, look, if you're an African-American in the inner city, you want to be safe in your own home. If someone attacks you or your family, you want to have reasonable laws that respect your right to defend yourself.
Talking with Ken Klukowski from Breitbart.com. And Ken, as we get further along here, do you think we'll actually start to see the hyperbole die down and the actual, I don't even say conversation, that might be too much to wish for, but an actual discussion about what stand your ground and what self-defense laws really mean? Because, I'm honestly, I assume you're seeing this too, attacks not just on stand your ground, but attacks on the idea of self-defense.
Well, that's exactly right. And, of course, stand your ground is just the outside your home version of castle doctrine. Castle is that man's home is his castle, that within your own home you have no duty to retreat. Before that, there were a number of states that said if you were attacked in your own home, if someone invaded your home, broke into your home and attacked you, you still had a duty to retreat then, which in that case means abandoning your house and anyone in your house to this predator who's now occupying your home, for crying out loud. Castle doctrine and stand your ground were just designed to restore common sense self-defense principles, and I think that you're right that already it's an issue of the facts are on our side. The reality is we have a constitutional right to defend ourselves. It goes to the heart of the Second Amendment, and that most self-defense laws over America's 200-plus year history have been common sense laws. It's just been some liberal, wrong-headed, anti-self-defense ideas that had gotten traction over in a minority of the states over recent decades. And the whole Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground push in legislation was just to take us back to the common sense place that we already were. If someone attacks you, you have a natural right, a God-given right, to protect your life and also to protect the life of innocent people under your charge, such as your spouse or your children.
Well, listen, Ken, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, sir, and I know we're going to be talking to you again very soon. I've got to ask you before we go, though, because I kind of feel like I'm talking to the father of a celebrity here. You are the proud papa of the youngest NRA Life member at the NRA annual meetings.
That's right, and the room loved his name, Remington. So my son, my third son, Remington Klukowski, was a youngest life member. We're very grateful to NRA for that award and for the help of the staff that helped us as we got there, making it a smooth thing for my wife and my son. So he'll have that plaque for the rest of his life, and of course, as he grows up, he'll see the pictures of him on stage with Wayne LaPierre, celebrating that event in St. Louis in 2012.
How cool is that? It's one of my favorite parts of the members meeting every Saturday morning. The oldest life member, the youngest life member, and this is actually the first time I think that I know a parent of the youngest life member. So I kind of feel cool by association, Ken. Congratulations, and give Remington our best. Okay.
Thanks so much. Will do, Cam.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.